Hey everyone, thanks so much for being here. I'm Kevin Deckinga, the League's Director of Membership and Development. I'm honored to present today's webinar, Ride with Pride, Celebrating LGBTQ plus bike organizations. Just a few moments. Here at the League, we believe that bicycling is for everyone, and building inclusive spaces is about so much more than just a welcome sign or a pride flag. Ensuring that everyone can enjoy the unique freedom and joy that biking brings means using our power to uplift the voices of individuals and organizations actively working to build cycling at the community level. Building a movement doesn't happen overnight, and creating a culture of active transportation and recreation involves countless advocates, educators, organizations, bike clubs, riding groups, and bike shops, each bringing their own perspective and focus to get more people riding safely, confidently, and freely. With this in mind, I'm proud to introduce our panel of local leaders, champions in the movement to grow cycling in communities and neighborhoods traditionally overlooked by mainstream bike advocacy, doing the good work of building a bicycle-friendly America for everyone. Here with me today, I've got an awesome panel today. I can't wait to introduce them all. Kevin Hall and Melissa Allen with Outspoken in Denver, Colorado. J. Marie Hill, founder of Black Trans Bike Experience and Fly by Bike, as well as Austin Killips, executive director of All Bikes Welcome. In a moment, I'll let our guests make a more full introduction and an overview of their respective work. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Quick reminders, this webinar is being recorded and you can find it later at bikeleague.org/webinars. Visit us on our YouTube channel. All of our webinars and lots of other great content is all there. Closed captions are available. Hit the show captions or hide captions in the Zoom menu. All attendees are being muted, but we want to hear from you. So type questions, comments, ideas into the Zoom chat, and even share where you're tuning in from. I mean, we want this to be a real community experience. If you're here with us today, you probably know a little bit about the League. We're the national bike advocacy organization, the grassroots advocates here in Washington, D.C. We've been around for a few years, since 1880, and we're proudly supported by members like you all over the country that want to support our great work to make bicycling safer and more accessible for everyone. Join us. Visit us at bikeleague.org. We advocate and we amplify the voices of advocates, and we champion policies and programs that make bicycling safer and more accessible. We educate and promote using best practices. And of course, we support and showcase the movement of change makers and their work. The bike movement is so much more than just the League and other national partners. It's so much more than state groups or local groups. The movement to make biking better and safer in our communities, stronger and healthier, relies on tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people like you and I doing this great work together. You probably know the League through our major programs, the National Bike Summit. We host every year in March here in Washington, D.C., where we celebrate the bike movement and the success of local advocates like yourself. Our federal advocacy work is where we work directly with members of Congress to help pass funding mechanisms for bike lanes and bike trails and policies and programs that protect the lives of people biking, walking, and rolling. Our Bicycle Friendly America program works directly with cities, towns, businesses, and universities, helping them become better places to ride. And we're also the smart cycling education folks, training and licensing and ensuring league cycling instructors that empower students with the skill and confidence to ride safely in their own communities. That's a lot. Um, don't miss our upcoming webinars. We've got a good one coming up in just a week or so, how Bentonville became a bike city. It's going to be really good. Scan that QR or visit our webinar page at bikeleague.org. Cool. I think that's the end of my slides. So I would love to I'm going to hand it off to Austin Killips. I also want to know we're going to do a whole Q&A session after our presenters. So make sure to feed your questions into the chat or the Q&A, and I'll be joined by my colleague, Marley Townsend, to help facilitate that. Hi, Marley. Help facilitate the Q&A at the end of the presentations. So yeah, with that, Austin, take it away.
Right. Give me, I think it seems that I have to, oh, no, I don't have to
Stopping
request.
my share.
Um, can you all see my screen?
Yes,
I'm gonna do the fun. Is this, I feel like that ratio is a little off. How about that? Is it visible? Is it legible?
that's great. I love it.
Okay. We're still good. All right. Wonderful. Hi, hello. My name is Austin Killops. I am the executive director of All Bikes Welcome, among other things. This is my slideshow. Um, who am I? Oh, that's me. I'm Austin Killips. I used to race bikes in a lot of disciplines, gravel, cyclocross, road, raced some ultras. I co-founded an inclusive UCI cyclocross racing team in 2022 called Nice Bikes. It was the natural progression of a longtime collaborator, Max Pratt's master's thesis work at RISD. We were able to amass some philanthropic donors and put together this program that was top to bottom staffed and all the racers and staff. It was all queer. We were a real outlier in the at the professional bike races, and we're real outliers once we started racing in Belgium. Um, I had the great joy of finding the limits of trans inclusion in elite sport with NICE and some other, pursuits. In 2023, I won a bike race of little consequence in the grand scheme of things, but of consequence to my life. I kind of became the poster child for the UCI ban on transgender athletes. It's a deeply personal and impersonal thing. Playbook they run on a lot of people. Um, and I was ready to be done with bicycles. I was divinity school bound, and this opportunity opened up, and I figured one last hurrah, let's jump in and do bikes one more time. Um, I kind of just structured a few key things that have been on my mind as I'm developing programming and as I've kind of been navigating this sport and this industry. On the inclusion question, where do we belong in sport? Our competition forward space is a viable pathway to pursue for community and connection. I think that there has been a large uptick in events celebrating things that are not competitive. I feel like I'm looking at events like Danger Bird, I'm looking at Bike Camp, I'm looking at Nutmeg Nor'easter. I think there's this wide swath of bike-based events that are really leaning in on community instead of competition. And I think this really does relate to the League of American Cyclists project in that like we are I think the local race scene is dying in a lot of ways, and I think people are being pushed away from a model, a like recreation forward model that I didn't prioritize the commuter or the everyday lay cyclist. It was really like a pipeline through race teams to competition and local crits, and now it feels like the pipeline. It feels like there's an opportunity to develop more communal pipelines that push folks towards a different model and vision, a little more self-directed form of sport, which I think opens more space for like infrastructure development and for kind of building a different type of demographic. Political optics. I think that the fight for trans inclusion competitive sport is it's a loss. We lost it, guys. It's a bummer. Uh, and I think that that's an enormous bummer, but I think what we can take from that is not to wallow, but really integrate the reality that what the right found was that sport was an incredibly viable battleground for public sentiment and cultural change and for changing it. And I think that there is a limited political and social utility to sport, but if there is one thing that the culture war around trans athletes has shown, it is that it remains a place where uh, public opinion can change and the temperature can change on things. And I think that this will not be the last time that sport is a sort of a fulcrum for politics in our world. And when those opportunities come about, I think we should look at what happened over the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years and take notes and sort of take notes on where we ceded ground to bad faith actors who then took the ball and ran and did things that are much more sinister than just barring us from sport. They used it as justification to, it was the starting point of like, how can we, exclude, trans and queer people from public life. I think there's a really great book by James Stout on the anti-fascist Olympics that were organized in protest to the Nazi Olympics. And I think that there is a legacy of sport and competition that is bound up with trade unionism and bound up with community that we can look to. Again, I don't necessarily know that competition in the way that sport has developed in the States is a good place for us to put a bunch of our energy, but I do think there are ways that we can see a model for sport to serve our communities and to offer spaces of like play and connection and competition in a healthy manner. Um, I'm new in this role at All Bikes Welcome. I'm really trying to lead with trust and an ethic of care. I'm honestly pulling back from an identity-centric form of community building. I think there are pros and cons to that. I think I have personal baggage with being made a culture war object that has made me reluctant to engage with it. But I think like leading with trust and a set of concise moral convictions is a lot easier. Like setting standards for how we comport ourselves in our community spaces feels really important right now, and that feels easier than using identity as a thing that we presume uh, as a thing that we presume makes us good people. Um, I'm really trying. I'm looking at folks like Matt Mason down in Las Cruces with Danger Bird. I think I've seen like I've participated in that event. I've seen what he's built there, and that is a free bike packing event that has an immense amount of support, draws the community in. He has reworked that route to be as accessible as possible, and I think those are spaces where you show up and you experience these things, interdependence, mutual aid, and you're empowering people to develop a relationship with the sport, to serve and help others in the way that they are being met as a beginner. Um, Also, well, Zaran Mamdani clearly has the mandate of heaven, Nixon 5. Like, there's something there. There is something to a type of organizing that is just articulating a political and moral vision that is clear, concise, and fast. And I think we got to look there. Um, All Bikes Welcome, what I'm doing now. I think the well is run dry for Queer Joy from a fundraising and grant writing perspective. And I think that is a bummer, but it just means we have to look elsewhere. I'm really leaning into something that feels scrappy, genuine, and fallible. I think that a DIY ethic. I come from ratty bike shops in Chicago. I come from couriers. I think that that is I think building the spaces that we want to be in and the spaces that have held us is the way forward, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm definitely reconsidering our approach to mountain bike education, and I think that here in Northwest Arkansas in particular, where there are so many expensive bikes floating around, it really produces an expectation for somebody outside looking in that like, oh, I need this fancy bike to go do this activity, and I think it just doesn't feel. I think a vision of inclusion is kind of. I think that if you want to get people on hybrids, if you want to get people to run what you brung, bring them in, show them what's possible, show them how to ride over a curb, show them that these like machine cut InfoSpec trails can be pedaled on your hybrid, and I think just develop education that is again, like coming from working in shops that are very commuter focused, like how much jargon can we delete? How much faff can we get out of the way? And how much can we just be like, what is riding your bicycle? And what do we need to delete to make this possible? And how do we need to construct rides to like meet the floor that a beginner is at? Um, and our other big project is developing a bike packing gear library with the public library. I think the ability to check stuff out with a library card as opposed to Going into a business or a private space where there is some expectation to be of the culture, I think it's an opportunity to reach a lot more people, and it's an opportunity to build a lot of really rad supplemental like literature and education that can hopefully allow folks to have self-directed adventure that might funnel them, a 10-mile overnighter that might funnel them into this broader ecosystem of events and community and connection. I'm really excited about that, and I think I think it's a really rad program. There's a lot of gear libraries around. There's a lot of things to crib from and reference, but I think I'm excited to build ours and serve the folks of in Fayetteville in Northwest Arkansas. Thank you for listening. That's what I got. I hope that wasn't too long. I wasn't timing.
That was wonderful. Thanks so much, Austin. I'll hand it over to Jay Marie.
What's going on, y'all? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
We went analog today with no AirPods and all that, so hopefully it's coming through clearly. Thank you so much, Austin. It was great to hear about how All Bikes Welcome is looking these days. I know our group had group of folks that we brought back in 2023, so it's always cool to see what the progress looks like and how people move over the
I
years.
hope I hope to see you at Grit this year.
Thank
It's cheaper, scrappier, and a gay party in the woods.
you. So I'm gonna get my slides together here too, but while I do that, I didn't have a slide about myself, so just a little bit about me. I'm from California, from the Bay Area. Grew up riding. Recently was able to tell a little bit about my story to Marley in the bike league. Some of you might know me from the cover and the squad. That was cool. Um, so thank you. Yes, yes, there it is, right there. Thank you, everybody. So yeah, about myself. My name is Jay Marie. I started this project, which I'll get into in 2019. This project, BTBE, which was distinctly formed essentially as like a Black specific, trans specific space back in 2019 as I was working at the ACLU. But because even after I left there, and as you know, the 2020 bike boom brought a lot more people into the spaces of bikes, there was something overlapping there that kind of made it grow further. So just a little bit about the project to start it. Essentially, I think it was actually really beautiful to kind of be going after Austin because I think we basically have been doing that model of just like come as you are. Here are the bikes that we can offer. Here's the trip that we have planned, and if this appeals to you, pull up. And as the only like primarily or as so the context for me really quick is that I didn't move in, I wouldn't say trans affirming primarily spaces before 2018 when I got the gig at ACLU. Like I had community inside queer and trans space, but being from California, that was very normalized. But when I moved to St. Louis in 2017, that is not as accessible for folks to kind of feel grounded in, or there's not as many people who are moving with that identity first, but, whether queer or trans. And a lot of the things that folks are dealing with where I live now in St. Louis is things that are kind of, I think what Austin was kind of speaking to towards the end is that identity doesn't necessarily get at what you really need. It's just a portion of your experience. And while I'm from a kind of national metro area that moved in a particular way with queerness, when I landed in St. Louis and I got the gig at the ACLU and I saw where the local landscape was, it meant that I had to simplify kind of kind of more theoretical approach to identity and really ground it in like, what can we really do? What does me moving in this way with this identity or looking like this make possible for other people? And I can't decide that for anyone, but I did speak to, my experience of wanting more Black folks in my organizing work or wanting to connect with the national organization I had been a part of before I landed at the ACLU, BYP 100, which moved with a Black queer feminist lens and made it normal. It wasn't like exceptionalized. It was just like, this is what we're here to do. So back in 2015, 14, when I started moving with them to when I moved out of my hometown, that was like my national kind of anchor of organizing and community. And so while the organization was on a pause and, a lot of us were moving around, I decided that I still wanted community, and I decided to work with one of the chapters in DC. And sorry, there's a lot of noise. Hopefully it's not too loud on me. But of course, not happening at any other time. But so I decided to work with one of the chapters in DC, and that ended up making the project bigger. So we'll get to that. But essentially, we move from a space of gathering to increase strength, access, representation, and community as we experience the benefits of exploring the earth on two wheels. Notice there's really nothing in there about identity, actually, right? And the format has been, if you see yourself in these photos, if you see yourself in these projects, if you see yourself wanting to go from where we're starting to where we're ending, point A to point B, pull up. I started writing because of my mother, and that's my mom here with the cubed shirt on there, the blue and yellow jersey. And this is a group of us from the 2023 overnight. So Black Transcendence as a container also is basically a space that I created when I left ACLU because I knew I needed something that wasn't just bikes, but would allow for some of the political and policy work to move as well. Given the work that I've done and the worry that people were coming into the bike space, it wasn't just because they were cyclists. A lot of people were not and still don't identify as cyclists, right? Because the community of riders in St. Louis is very, very, very white. And it's very much a segregated space. Kind of like, what this call might feel like in some ways, right? We have different communities that we're moving through. And so in 2021 or 2022, actually, we did our first Pride ride. Really just was a regular ride. We've been doing group rides and we kind of called this one a Pride ride, but it wasn't that different from our other rides. We went to one of our rides early on that wasn't a Pride ride specifically, but was community oriented and not like planning for a trip somewhere, was just like to a few local gardens that happened to be run by queer folks, and then to like an artist launch where he was selling shirts and it was gelato, right? So it wasn't necessarily always just because of bikes that we were gathering. It was really to kind of, even for me, learning the community, but also acknowledging that bikes bring us into community in ways that cars or other activities don't. So as I mentioned on the front end, we gather to increase strength, mobility, justice, access, and representation, and to deepen community through connection with the earth and exploring it on two wheels, because those are the things that felt like after I did the first initial ride, which I'll get into, and some of the rides in the preceding months, it felt like it wasn't just about bikes. It was all these other benefits that people were getting. And even though that's my experience and the ways that I've come into activity and the injuries that I've been recovering from in the history of my athleticism, bikes were just a place that I landed. And I noticed that there was like kind of a predisposition of people either being really old, quote unquote, or really young. And I just felt like there was this big gap inside of who else would or might find joy inside of cycling. And being from a city where people ride a lot, the Bay, of course, we have 1.5 seasons, so it's more of the year that we get to ride. But St. Louis having a 4-season process of life, it's just been beautiful to see folks really commit to these things and not necessarily think of it as like, oh, I have to be a cyclist to get strength, to get access, to get representation. It was just kind of a byproduct that we all looked alike in some ways. I just wanted to speak to some of the folks that we've worked with before I talk a little bit about the projects, because I think when I think about why I said yes to this webinar, it was basically to acknowledge that many people are not going to come through the cycling world. They're going to come from their life, and they're going to want to bring people together, whether that's an organizational process or a local grassroots effort. And they're going to want to know where to get funding, or they're going to want to know what identities work for certain conversations. And so regionally, we've been supported by some of the cycling folks, right? We have like TrailNet, which is our local bike and advocacy organization, bike education, even though there's no education arm, it's primarily like trails advocacy and streets advocacy. And then we have an unurbanist club group that has a committee on cyclists and pedestrians, CP2, and they've been doing a lot of advocacy on like Route 66, basically, Gravois. So when people think of Route 66, of course, you think of cars, and it's very much built as that's what they were building for back in the day, which apparently Route 66 is turning 100 years old this year. It's like a main thoroughfare right through America, but comes in really a solid chunk of it goes through St. Louis. So we've been working with folks and learning more about some of those kind of intricacies between bike-friendly communities and advocacy and streets and things like that. And not necessarily only doing identity work, partly, right? Because there are only so many people who move with that frame in this region, and also the like critical mass that one would need to organize to pull things around, change forward, are often practice based, like athletic or project based, and not identity or personal based. People have like a very private relationship with their identity here in a way that they'll come together in critical mass like once a month maybe, but it's not like a group thing that's always pretty consistent for folks. So these are some of our other regional partners. I've done some work with Bike East Bay, Red Bike and Green ATL. We took a group to 2022, their 10-year anniversary. River City Outdoors, they're just always trying to get more Black and brown folks outside, in addition to the gear library they've created. And then nationally, RAR, which many folks may have heard about if they're on this webinar, Radical Adventure Riders, kind of an outgrowth of, I think, what used to be called WTFMs, or with maybe other words in there too. I forget the full title that they once upon a time had. Maybe in the chat you can add it. But these are just some folks that over the years, including Bike League, of course, Movement for Black Lives, Trans Justice Funding Group, Black Freedom Outfitters, Red Bike and Green, both Oakland and national. So these are just some groups that when it came to me and the work that I was doing, people were feeling drawn through these channels, and it wasn't only Queer First or identity first. There initially were some things that we moved where we were like, if we're prioritizing certain community members, we need to have rides at certain times. Like if folks are working class and they work all week, we're not going to have rides on the weekend, on the weekday nights. They're working until 6 or 7. That's not practical, right? So we were for a long time keeping our rides to Sundays. A lot of folks work on Saturdays. So those were ways where we're like, if we know who we're talking to, and it's not just about identity or cyclists by itself, it's actually this intersection that we want to make possible for more people. That means we're going to move a certain way, and we're going to get funding or get projects that orient from like significant places like Ferguson or Defiance, Missouri, right on the Katy Trail. We're going to figure out ways to name and narrative our work because we know that a lot of people are not going to think of it as something that they see themselves in, or they're going to want to see a particular frame. So basically, every project we did, I was really adamant about taking pictures or leaving some sort of trace because that's just, I noticed as I started building these things that people didn't find themselves reflected. And for me, that was fine. But yeah, what WTF Bike Explorers, thank you. So yeah, this is just a glimpse of some of our projects. Basically, the process that we oriented around was like if we do a trip every other year or every few seasons, that'll give us enough time to both appreciate the ride itself, prepare for the next one, and things like that. So we've kind of been in this cyclical, like every other year big trip, and that means that the smaller trips or the smaller rides to prepare for the trip means that we have more people joining those because they feel a part of a larger project. They feel a part of a larger journey. Even if they can't go on the big trip, they'll join the 10-mile ride or the 20-mile ride because to them that's a lot for people who don't bike, right? And even getting their bike together for that is a significant enough effort that people feel a part of something. And so big ups to Jamila who joined me at the Bike League summit this year and who was a big part of our 2025 ride. And we both have done Major Knox tour. So this is our 2019 ride that really started us off. This year, we don't have any big rides planned right now, but we are supporting a couple riders, Jamila and another person who participated in our 2025 trip on this bike vessel trip, which is has been made into a documentary, but this year they're offering it as like a community experience. And it's two men, two black men, father and son. The father had like been going through a lot of health issues, and so him and his son he took up cycling, and his son started cycling with him to like watch how he flipped his life around. And so just a couple other things. Of course, you can read these. We bike because it does enhance the connection to the earth, and it does deepen embodiment and self-awareness, and it helps you grow your community knowledge and your power, and challenge yourself. And so, like I said, Jamila and I both have done this ride. And there isn't like a big crew of folks that run all of this. It's kind of like as people feel called to ride, they invite people. And there's a layer where it's, storytelling is there. There's some events that we've done in between the big rides. So 2022, we weren't offering any big rides. I did Foco Fondo that year, but broadly it was like, let's just do some group rides. Let's get people outside. We've done send-off dinners to bring community in. So even if you're not going the ride, we'll get it catered or someone will donate, and then we'll be able to bring people in that way. And then, as you can see, is Jamila and I at the 2024 Gala TrailNet. I did the bike rodeo last November after getting my LCI, my league certified instructor pass certification format. And yeah, we've been starting to do fly-by-bike classes. This is our Ferguson ride back in the day, and this is our ride from last year that happened to be during the tornado, so that was complicated. But encourage anybody to come find us or to share if you've enjoyed a ride with us in the past. Shout out to the Bike League folks who joined us back in March 2026 to ride from the the History Museum to the Howard University. So these are some things that we've done to kind of close the gap between the big rides and build community.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, I want to keep us moving along. And like I said, we'll do lots of Q&A at the end. So think of those questions. I'll turn it over to Kevin Hall and Melissa Allen.
Hey, everybody, and happy Pride. My name is Kevin Hall. I'm the secretary of Outspoken. We are a cycling group here in Denver, Colorado. Outspoken is Colorado's home for LGBTQ plus cyclists and allies. We have some hetero identified folks in the group these days. Our focus is on building strength, stamina, and mental fitness in an inclusive and supportive environment. It's an honor and humbling to be here today with Austin and Jay Marie, who both have such extensive and successful experience in the cycling community. This is all relatively new to me, but it's not new to Outspoken. Outspoken has been around since 1998. And the organization was formed at a time when Colorado had a very different identity and a very different way of accepting the LGBTQ community than it does today. In the 90s, Colorado was known as the hate state. We were the home of Focus on the Family. And in 1992, we passed a statewide referendum amendment that basically opened the door to discriminating against LGBTQIA plus individuals. So in the 90s, a group of cyclists got together, and with a focus on visibility and some other things that we may judge today, such as respectability and an idea of philanthropy by bicycle, they sought to create a presence in sport across the state of Colorado on bicycle. And so today in 2026, we run a season of rides that goes from May to October. Every weekend over the course of that season, we offer three rides at an easy, intermediate, and advanced level. So the cyclists of all abilities have a space to come in, join our club, and find community on two wheels here with Outspoken. In addition to those three-level rides every weekend, we also do a variety of community impact rides where we show up in force to some of the larger rides that happen in the state. We have a team going here in under a month to represent us in the Triple Bypass, one of Colorado's landmark cycling events. In addition to those community impact rides and weekly rides, we have a variety of social events. And we also do, to Jay Marie's point, about 10 to 20 miles, sometimes feeling like a lot for cyclists. Some shorter ice cream rides here within Denver that can be between 5 and 10 miles to get more people out. Just to share a little bit with you about my own personal experience, I started riding a bike seriously in 2022, which is the year I turned 40. Went to the doctor and was told my cholesterol was high and some other numbers that I didn't like, and decided I had the opportunity for a midlife crisis or a midlife renaissance, and decided to try for the Renaissance. So I joined Outspoken in 2023. On the left there, you see a picture of me at the end of my first ride up Lookout Mountain here in Denver, which is a signature climb in the Front Range. And then a picture of me last summer in a triathlon, which is something that prior to joining Outspoken, I had never thought I would do or ever thought that I could do. When I joined Outspoken in 2023 with a focus on my own physical health and fitness, I found an incredible community. The community was supportive, they provided guidance and encouragement. And as I mentioned before, there were members of the community who told me I could do things that I never thought I could do. In addition, in cycling, I found a space not just to get healthier physically, but I also found that cycling had a dramatic impact on my mental health. And so in 2023, when I joined Outspoken, we were a small ragtag organization. Since 1998, the original members and some of our veteran members had continued writing and continued showing up and continued building the organization. And also, after the 2020 pandemic times, the organization had lost its steam. Uh, Melissa Allen, our president, who's here with me today, joined the board in, I believe, 2023. And is that right? Yeah, 2023, and began the work of rebuilding Outspoken. And I joined her in that work in 2024. So this is us at the beginning of the season in 2024. This is us at the beginning of the season this year. So in that time, we have doubled our membership. We've increased our sponsorship dramatically from 2 sponsors to 14 sponsors. Our ride guide team, so the folks in the organization who are welcoming new members and leading the rides, now includes over 20% of our overall membership. And we're also proud that within this context of growth, some of the veteran members, some of whom have been around since 1998, but maybe weren't participating as much, have started participating more and more frequently. So we have new writers, our new writers are staying, and our veteran writers have come back and they are writing more frequently. In addition, we're proud that over that time, we've increased the diversity of our board of directors. So we have 7 folks. We now have more racial diversity, gender diversity, and ability diversity on our board team than we did before. And we're beginning to see that increased diversity reflected in our membership. So I wanted to share with you a little bit today about how we grew. And the most important way connects to something that Austin said earlier. Austin said that we need concise moral convictions. One of the first things that we did in our effort to grow was to become really clear about what our values are. And the most important value that we have as an organization is that we are a community first organization and we are inclusive. This means we're inclusive across abilities, we're inclusive across age levels, we're inclusive across gender identities and racial identities. And that community first orientation is the most important value that we have as an organization. In addition to solidifying our values, we worked on getting our message out, doing a little work on our social media. Well, we started using our social media. And what we found is just by getting our name out there, getting our mission out there, and getting our spirit of inclusivity out there, more and more people started showing up. Once we had more people showing up, we also focused on how we were communicating within, how we're talking to our membership, keeping them excited about the work that we're doing, keeping them invested in what we're doing, and keeping them showing up to build their strength, stamina, and mental fitness in community. We also improved our calendar. We created more consistency to our rides, more predictability to our rides, and we were able to increase our rides dramatically to serve riders at all levels of the organization. So this year we have more rides for folks who are beginning or who want an easier ride, and we have more rides at the other end of the spectrum for our advanced or expert rides. So when we think about why folks join Outspoken, I mentioned the idea of inclusivity a moment ago. I've mentioned the idea of community first. There are a couple of other things that make our organization special. One of them that I wanted to name today is that we are an intergenerational organization. When I joined Outspoken in 2023, I might have been the youngest member of the organization that year. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it was that. And when I joined, I learned in that time uh, how exciting and interesting it was to engage in a cycling community with folks who had had very different life and lived experiences than what I had had. So I grew up as a child in the 90s. When I was in high school, Will and Grace was on TV and Ellen came out. That gives me a very specific and contextualized experience of being a cis gendered identified gay man in America. And as the momentum in our country started to shift a little bit, what I found was it was helpful to hear from folks who had lived through, fought during, and been activists during more difficult times in our country. And so when we think about what we want Outspoken to be today, we have members in our organization as young as 22 years old, and we have members in our organization in their 70s. For LGBTQIA folks, we are people whose identity does not track generally with the other members of our family. We can't go to our moms and dads and parents and say, how do I show up in this space? And so in 2026, when we find that we're fighting more battles politically, we're fighting more battles around the country, we're fighting more battles definitely in the space of sport and the space of cycling, our intergenerational engagement is one of the things that I think makes Outspoken particularly unique. I also wanted to talk about the idea of safety within a cycling organization that serves LGBTQ plus membership. Over the past couple of years, we've found that we've had new members coming to our organization from other places. A member comes to mind. He and his wife moved here from Salt Lake City, where they'd lived for almost a decade. Salt Lake City had been a safe and comfortable home for them for a while. And then at some point, it wasn't. They found themselves getting harassed in bathrooms, getting harassed in other public spaces, and they decided they needed to leave. So they moved here to Denver, a more welcoming community, and Outspoken immediately provided them with a space to feel safe, to begin networking, to build a community in their new home of Denver. Safety comes up in number of other ways in our organization as well. I think to our kickoff ride on, I believe, May 4th of this year, as we were starting the ride, a new cyclist who joined us, who was a trans woman, was asking me about the bathrooms along the ride. And I shared with her where I knew there were gender neutral bathrooms, where I knew there were women's bathrooms, and where I knew there were men's bathrooms. And I also shared with her as she told me that on this ride before she had felt unsafe using facilities. And I reminded her that today she was with us. She was with Outspoken. She was part of a larger community that could protect her and help keep her safe. And one of the things she said to me in that moment was, I've never felt as safe on a bicycle. In 2026, when queer people don't feel safe in all the spaces that we go into, we're excited to provide a safe space for queer people of a variety of backgrounds and identities in our club. I wanted to share with you what this looks like in reality. I got this text message from a new member of our organization late last week. She shared with me, she's a young trans woman. I love the community that I found, and Outspoken's been such an amazing place to let my hair down, so to speak. I know that you've made me and so many others feel welcomed into the space. And as queer people who may have been rejected in the past from other spaces, it's truly magical. And so, as we continue to try to create a magical space for queer cyclists here in Denver, we're also thinking about what that looks like in 2026. In 2026, we're recognizing that we have a long, hard battle ahead of us. We see the surveys showing support for our communities and the individuals who make up those communities dwindling in our country. And so we know that as queer people today, we have to develop the strength, stamina, and mental fitness to stay in this fight for a long time. Also in 2026, as a cycling organization serving queer cyclists, we recognize that there is a need to create a strategic effort to serve a more racially diverse membership. As a board, we're proud of how our membership has increased in diversity, including racial diversity over the past several years, but we're not where we need to be. The the physical and mental health benefits that come from cycling, that come from cycling within a safe and inclusive community, are benefits that we want to share broadly with all members of our LGBTQIA plus community here in Denver. And so as we look forward, we're beginning to develop ways where we don't let diversity happen just by the good spirit and actions of our community, but by a strategic and thoughtful plan for inviting more folks in, making sure they feel welcome and supported, and making sure they stay, grow, and can lead in our organization. In addition, in 2026, Pride means being explicitly vocal in our support for our trans members and making sure that that support continues, not just within our club, but also in the community impact spaces we ride as well. And finally, on the theme of today being kind of a hard time to be gay, we also feel the need to network within and outside of our community to continue growing Outspoken and growing the way that cycling can support LGBTQIA plus individuals in our communities. And so this is Outspoken. We're so glad to be with you all today. So excited to be here learning from Austin and Jay Marie, and we appreciate everyone for being here.
That was beautiful. Honestly, each of your presentations I found really deeply inspiring, and I really appreciate y'all taking the time to be here with us. And so I have a longer list of questions than we'll be able to get to, and that's totally fine. So I want to kick off the Q&A with a question that J. Marie flagged as kind of a priority. So I'd like to ask them first. As a leader, what did you want your club, your group to feel like that you hadn't found elsewhere? And that was to J. Marie. I'm sorry if you didn't catch the first part.
Gotcha. I was gonna let anybody say it. I would just suggested it be a priority because I think there in each region that we work in, I think there's like a presupposed set of identities that people move with, right? That are not the same everywhere. And I think even though these definitions and these identities technically have some sort of community held definition, the reality of like what people need in a region is defined by both the political context and the community kind of like the community's preset way of showing up for each other. Um, and St. Louis is the Missouri world is it's a show me state. It's like show me what you're talking about. You can talk at me all day, but I need to see what I need to see what you're doing, and I need to see how it's benefiting people's lives. And so while I was at ACLU, I was training leaders and helping people see the kind of anti-LGBT attacks in a particular light. But because the contingent of people who were one out trans, queer, personally aware and able to use that language, and two people who were politically active or felt politicized in that identity was not as many people as I had when I was in California, the community looked different to show up for, and the ways that people wanted to show up for each other looked different. And at the time, I would say, mid 2010s, late 2010s, early 2020s, the conversation around gender, and I think we've grown from this, but the conversation around gender and identity was primarily driven by like harm, right? And negativity and being at the kind of threshold of being someone who is basically teaching someone about gender while you live it yourself. And at the time, that was really new for a lot of people, and a lot of us came out the gate with a lot of rage and anger because of mistreatment as young people. And I think as we've grown older, the reality is like the work that it takes to maintain relationship and to introduce new identities and new realities into the common culture is like graceful work. And at the same time that we don't like that, that's how you really move people forward. And so when it came to the bike space, I was brought into it by my mother, and so I have a very like parental, almost like community, super community building frame on it. And it's not necessarily bike first. It's not necessarily identity first. It's kind of one of those things that's like very practical. Like, are you coming or not? Are you actually gonna keep me safe in real life or not? Do I need to tell you my pronoun in order for you to care about me? Like, there are ways that I think we navigated that weren't identity first only, but the way I wanted people to feel was prioritized in their life. So it wasn't just about your identity or your ability to bike. It was about your ability to show up for yourself. And biking is one way to show that. But I think it was primarily to say, okay, I don't necessarily want to be in an all white space. And I don't necessarily feel like gender and transness is the main thing I want to talk about. But I do want it to be the floor where people can come to the space and not have to hear about super binary, fraternity, sorority, school questions, like teachers, other people that you're riding with, elders. They might have questions, but to be outside of a space where that's going to be super prioritized and to just ride with people where it's not about your identity, but it's about coming together and making the most of your life and your ability to breathe at the age that you are in the body that you're in. That was a big part of how we moved. And so I hope that people have been able to feel just grounded in the kind of body, mind, spirit framework that we bring. That's not just about one identity or one skill set, but does hopefully translate beyond any one activity into your life.
Absolutely. I really appreciate that. And, you know, Jay Marie alluded to that we'd had a kind of interview for a LCI Spotlight, and I really enjoyed hearing about how you kind of start out the rides with a grounding experience that really like grounds you in your body and makes you feel safe and welcome. And as someone that has chronic illness and, I don't look like other cyclists in my body necessarily. That is a really empowering, thing to hear that there's ride leaders that have this training and that are, making new cyclists feel safe. Um, so to kind of repitch the question to the rest of the team, it was, what do you want your group to feel like that you didn't find elsewhere? What makes your space feel different, and what do you want it to feel like?
I'll have a go if that works. Mine will be as in depth, I think, as a lot of folks because my background really in cycling is just I did not have a car. I did not have money for a car. A bike is how I got places, and then some coworkers kind of challenged me to join a ride, like an organized ride, and it was amazing. And that kind of tipped the scale for me to start riding. But with the body that I have and the way that I move in the world, like you wouldn't necessarily peg me as a cyclist out in the streets. And I have found within lots of different within the queer community, I have had trouble. Like I've had trouble feeling belonging in lots and lots of spaces because there's always a perceived right way of doing the things that we're supposed to do, right? Like there's a right way to ride a bike. There's a right bike to have. There's a right way to be feminine, a right way to be masculine. There's a right way to do just everything. You name it, there's a right way to do it. And that makes it really challenging to move in spaces. And I wanted a space where we don't do that. We don't tell you how to be. We don't ask you who you are. We don't make you check a box. You just show up because you want to ride a bike and have a good time and not feel like you have to put on a different persona because you've arrived at this space, right? I want the club to be who you are most comfortable with as yourself every day. I want that to be the person who is showing up for our rides and getting on a bike and being that person, but on a bike. It's really not, to me, a complicated idea.
Cool. Love it. Um, so as I'm talking to, you all as leaders, you're all leaders in these organizations. Um, and I'm curious, and I think you've each kind of talked about it a little bit in your presentations, but like how did you grow into the leadership role? Was it a deliberate choice to step into leadership, or did it just kind of grow organically from who you are and your lived experiences? And feel free, anybody can jump in.
I feel like it is a thing that happened organically, but I don't know. I think often about the first event I ever did, which was a brevet, our engineering event, and they were concurrently running a 300, a 600, and a 1200 K. And I remember just very nice people shepherding me through my first 300K ride and finishing and walking into the silly conference room that all of the rides were run out of and at a hotel. And there were just all these hot pots running and kind, cycling aunts and uncles who were just like, here, this food is for you. And I like paid God like $15 to be there or something. And it's just like, it's one of many experiences where I was very held and nurtured and supported in my pursuits as somebody interested in riding the bicycle and somebody who was like really prioritizing it on that given day. And I think that those moments were moments where I was like, oh, I'm really excited to facilitate that experience for someone else. And I think all of us have hit a point where we've logged enough miles where it's like, okay, there's I know what this is, and I know enough that I can help somebody else have their own version of it. And it felt like the natural progression of being in welcoming and supportive and kind-hearted communities.
I think, for Melissa and me both, leadership and Outspoken was at first something that was just a necessity. The club needed leaders. It was struggling. We loved it. It had served us both well, and we wanted to see it continue to grow and develop. And we're both hard workers, so we put our heads down and did the work of building out what the club needed to continue to succeed, alongside the rest of our board, who are also wonderful, hardworking folks. I think today, what leadership looks like for both Melissa and for me and Outspoken, as we've grown sort of the range of ages in our group in particular, we're excited about seeing younger folks coming into the club. Leadership for us is about identifying, cultivating, and supporting young folks as they grow into leadership within the organization. And so this can look like a new cyclist with us or a newer cyclist with us standing and stepping into a blocker role for the first time, or a cyclist stepping up to lead rides for the first time. And I think, in particular, for young people in the queer community, there has been something for both Melissa and me that's incredibly exciting, heartwarming, and fulfilling about seeing people become more comfortable standing 10 toes down in themselves and what they want to say to our community of cyclists. So we both came here because we saw work to be done. We wanted Outspoken to continue, and we loved it. And leadership for us today really looks like thinking about what's next for the organization and cultivating folks as they grow.
I really appreciate that, and those edges I think are really important to name. And what came to mind when I heard this question, which one more time was like, how did you become a leader of the group that you're working with, basically?
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I think two things come up. One, this post that I saw recently that was like, leadership or being a leader is not really about being the person, or usually is not the person came and like took power. It's that they're doing something that no one else wanted to do. Right. And I think as long as we kind of acknowledge, like for me, when I came in, I was saying, how do I want my space to feel? Because I moved to St. Louis where these projects, these groups, these writing spaces that did exist, the few and far between ones, didn't feel like I was going to enjoy myself, or didn't feel like they were speaking for me. And I felt like if I'm going to spend all my time or get all my energy out in this way, I'm going to be doing this for hours and hours, or having people that I'm meeting through this space. I want there to be life upgrades that I'm getting through it. I don't just want to like ride with strangers and then go home. That just didn't feel helpful to my life at the time. And then as I would go to other events, I also felt like there was no activity culture. There was no like community of people where you got together. You didn't necessarily have to have a picture taken. Maybe there's some cool pictures, but the point is getting out there and doing things that help you go a little farther, or you can go a little further faster together, because that's just what humans do together. And I think while I didn't know the range of how people would have access to the bikes or have access to the gear that we've needed. Sometimes the other thing I didn't put on the document, and the other thing I think of is that I would do like pop up bike shop or find a mechanic who would just help me to move all the gear that I have outside. I have a stand, and it looks like I know what I'm doing as soon as we put it up. So even if I'm not personally the most expert person, somebody St. Louis has enough of a gap in who feels represented that they'll come up and be like, "What are you doing?" And bikes are this kind of universal thing that I wanted to feel like, one, I don't have to talk about your identity, but I know that because there aren't that many people with biking who are black and who are queer and trans, even locally, that was a whole other thing. So those two things together, in terms of identity and blackness, and just like being a person who is doing something that people are like, "What's that?" Something the kids can ask about. Some people can just walk by and be like, "Ah, can you come? Whatever. Can I come bring it?" These things that happen, like that to me as a former kindergarten teacher, as a person who just wants people to learn and wants to be able to pass on things, like Austin said, you just want people to feel what you felt, not because you're selfish, but actually the opposite, right? There's this energy of like, somebody looked out for me, and however I can show up for a community that has literally never seen this, that's, of course I'll do that. Not because I want to be the isolated leader, but because I think that it's worth like adding to my life as part volunteer, part my job, part community offering, part organizing in like a humble way that requires, all of my gifts at that time. Maybe I can give my gifts in other ways too, but for it to be something that enriched people, that was always my goal, as well as for me to feel like, I'm giving from something that I personally benefited from and also still need, whether that's community or affirming spaces that don't make me kind of like be a representative, but really make it so I can just be myself and everything else is just a perk.
That was amazing. I loved all those answers so much. It makes me want to ask the question again, but I won't because we only have a few minutes left. So I think the last question I want to land on is asking about, y'all are talking about especially bringing youth into this space and bringing people into biking itself, who have never really had the chance to feel safe, welcome, or have access to bikes. And I really thought it was cool how Jay Marie mentioned the dinner party where people could show up, and still kind of be part of the event, even if they didn't, want to actually go out on the ride. So I'd love to hear, do y'all have any other insights on kind of how to attract and recruit people who are new to bikes, and how to make them feel welcome?
I can step forward. There are a couple of things that we do as an organization. I think the first thing is that we are not about showing off fancy bikes in our organization, and that culture is something that we actively speak out against. It doesn't mean we don't celebrate folks on New Bike Day. Of course we do. But we're an organization where if your tires stay full of air and your chain has some lubricant on it, we can ride, right? We can make this happen. And we make that very clear to folks. We also make sure that our folks who are in sweeper roles are truly supportive, right? So if you're a new cyclist who's shown up to a ride and today is a day full of suck, you've got someone by your side cheering you on, supporting you both in that moment of pain as well as after the moment of pain, following up with you and making sure that you'll come back and continue riding with us. We also offer at the beginning of our season orientation rides. So we offer some rides that are explicitly for folks who are first time group riders. And we work with one of our sponsors to offer some basic bike mechanics skills, such as changing your tire, greasing your chain, that sort of stuff.
Um, it took me a moment because I'm new to Northwest Arkansas, and so there's like a very different culture here from like a major metro area to another area, and something that I'm really working on. Like at my, I think it's really important to have a culture that doesn't embrace consumerism, and that's the thing that's like really pushed, especially in a place like this. So having folks having a group ride where people are there and some might be wearing kit, others might be wearing t-shirts. People are on like a full spectrum of bikes, and then doing everything you can to develop routes that meet the folks on those bicycles and clearly communicating the expectations and what's there. And also, I think the thing about beginners is that there's a really there's a low floor, high ceiling for who considers themselves a beginner. So you really have to show up and be ready to move at someone else's pace. Um, and that pace might be slower than you expect. And you show up and you walk up the hill with them, and then you sit down and you chat, and you have a nice time, and you build that experience. around those folks. And if people need to go fast, no one needs to go faster. If someone wants to go faster, like other opportunities will exist, other things are there. But I think a truly beginner ride is really meeting somebody at the floor.
I just want to add something really quickly. I know we're wrapping up here, but one thing that I talked about in my spotlight that you can go back and read is that I don't personally love that sometimes when we talk about identity, the bar becomes lower because there's this like alignment of we have to meet people only at the like weakest link without per se acknowledging like the context of the skill set that they're arriving into. And I think while it's real that some people are beginners and we have to meet them period where they are, I think it's really important that one of the things that I think I've done a lot of the way of my journey is like help people know when they're being talked down to. So even if you're not per se super identifying as like a cyclist or somebody who's like super fast or whatever, there's a way that you can notice how people are interacting with you to keep the nonsense at bay, to keep when people are talking down to you out of your main way that you're going to interact back with them. So even if you're a beginner, to me, you can still be a watchful eye on just like not letting people talk to you any kind of way, because I think when you are a beginner, whatever state of beginner you're in, as Austin said, there's low floor, high ceiling. The reality is like people are going to try and get away with being kind of weird to you, and there's a lot of helpfulness that is offered too. But there's something about your frame of mind that I think by saying, okay, yes, you have these identities, you have these elements that come with you, you get to create your standard and elevate your standard at the timeline that you want to. And people, you don't need to let people talk to you a certain way. Or I want you, I really encourage people to be mindful of what they let people do around them and to them, because a lot of times people don't know there's another way and don't know that people are actually being weird, even because they just want to be helped.
Yeah.
Some of the whiteness and some of the kind of like talking down to people gets in the culture. And I really think a big part of bringing folks and helping them feel comfortable is to give them the power to say, I like this, I don't like that, or I want this and I don't want that, or give them a goal to say, here's how this experience can be curated based on some of the things that you've mentioned are important to you. So I really appreciate, Austin, your frame of like, there is a wide range of how people move, and at the same time that we got to meet people where they are. I think it's exciting to let them know that they don't have to be a representative in like a certain speed or level to just find their skill set and find their joy inside of the spaces that they feel called to be in.
I feel like it's a really fun challenge to try to develop like your like back end pedagogy that is empowering people to develop their own relationship, right? Because when you are talking down to them and you're kind of like putting them on rails through your experience, you're centering yourself, right? And you're pushing them in a direction. Like it's showing up and being genuine and being sincere and like giving them a space to learn how to play with the bike. And they might learn how to play with the bike and find joy in a way that's different than you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so thank you for the addendum. Like, I know that frustration.
That's awesome. Well, we are at time, so I just want to say thank you all again for being here and sharing your insights. I know it meant a lot to me, and I think that, this recording will go far and wide. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you. All
You
right.
know.
Bye.